right, so I put a slide together saying cybercrime basically means an illegal act, and it can be committed by means of a computer or assistance of a computer network, web-based information communication technologies, the internet, basically. This is how we understand cybercrime for this talk. Basically, there are three different kinds of how you could look at cybercrime. It could be that there's no other way of committing it, no other way of targeting a victim than the computer. So it's against the computer, such as virus planting. It can be a conventional crime that used to be in the offline world but has transferred into cyberspace because of the technologies that we have today. Or it can be a pure cybercrime, which means that the opportunities through the internet that we have today, through the technologies, that's why it is perpetrated in cyberspace. So keep those three sorts of cybercrime in mind. I will get back to it later. Interpersonal cybercrime is something, interpersonal is actually something I came up during my thesis when I studied criminology and looked at cybercrime that affects us personally and in a very intimate moment, such as starting to date online or sending pictures, sexting sometimes called, sending pictures of sexual content to someone else that you might trust or that you, even that you don't know. It can be a stranger, it can be someone known to you. But when becoming victimized through that, it affects us very personal. So I called it interpersonal. So I'm actually sometimes very critical about that we should consider cybercrime not just according to the data loss or what data was breached or how much money we lost, the monetary loss, but also what did it do to the victims, mentally, physically, psychologically. So that means that this person has trust issues afterwards, sleeplessness, panic attacks, something like that. It's not very often considered in current research. So while we prepared the talk for today, we thought a bit which kind of cybercrime or occurrence do we want to address. And in my opinion, cybercrime will always be hybrid. There will never be one unique cybercrime that we could put into a category. So I think it's good if we take the term sextortion as a wider understanding, which means it's put together from sex and extortion, which means that someone is using sexual material or content to extort you, to blackmail you, to ask for more material, be it pictures or videos, or to blackmail you. In the definitions that I found, it always says someone unknown to you, and I think I disagree, and it's also something that we look at when considering image-based abuse. It is also someone known to you, especially because nowadays we express ourselves through sending messages, images, videos, and that's something that we most often do with someone we know, especially when it comes to intimate content. So keep this in mind as well. Sextortion means someone is extorting you, blackmailing you for more material or other forms, which I will go into in the next minutes. So we're going to look at varied forms and try to differentiate that between who are the victims, who's the target of that sextortion, for example, what's the motivation of offenders. I will give you two examples that I came across during my thesis as well, that I found had they were very much alike, but on the other hand, very different as well. But both are considered as a form of sextortion. Ashley was at the time of when she became a victim 17 years old, and she was contacted by someone from the internet stating that this person had nude pictures of her, and if she wouldn't send more nude pictures, he would expose her to friends, family, to her school. She at that time wasn't 100% sure if he actually has nude pictures of her. She couldn't really be yeah, completely certain. So she did comply, and she sent more nude pictures, and this went on over a very long period of time, up until that degree that that person asked up to 60 pictures of her per night in her lingerie, completely naked, and in different postures. And it only stopped because her mother discovered the conversations online and went to the police. When the police started the investigation, they actually found that guy. He was very young, between 20 to 30 years old, and had victimized not just her, but 349 other young girls, and had stored her images, or the other images, in files on his computer based on their willingness to comply, to send pictures. Daniel Perry was very much in the media, a 17-year-old boy from Scotland. He met a very attractive young girl online. They switched into video chat platform, or to a video chat platform, and did sexual acts through the webcam. What he didn't know is that he was recorded, and after that blackmailed for money. So they threatened him to upload the material on YouTube unless he pays. But he was not able to pay. He was 17 years old. Instead, he killed himself out as a result from the victimization. So you can see it's already two different forms, and it does vary a lot. So I would like to answer the question after that slide: how does image-based abuse fit in this? Because image-based abuse or revenge porn means that someone that you know and have sent pictures to, most likely an ex-partner, uploaded pictures from you, sexually explicit ones, and they are now public for everyone to see, for everyone to comment, to download, to distribute as they like. So there is no extortion in that case, but as I will go on, I will explain that some of the websites actually offer legal help by taking down the images for $200 to $500 per image. So it's either you pay or your picture stays up on the site. So it can be, in a wider sense, a form of sextortion as well. Okay, so let me develop this a bit. I'll turn this off. Let's see. Okay, so if we call this sextortion, and I'd like to go into 3 different forms of sextortion. And then look at the motive, offender, and the victims. So the first form I just call sextortion. It's the case of Ashley. So in her case, it was clear that that the targets were young girls. So this can actually go into sextortion, but also into cyber grooming or child pornography. She was not legally a child anymore. That depends on the country. If 13 or 14 is in most of the countries where you are a child. Cyber grooming means when an adult is approaching a kid online with the intent of sexual acts or exchange through webcam or images. So in her case, the offender was, the motive is sexual content. This could be due to pedophile preferences, but also in that case where the guy actually collected pictures and had a great amount of pictures, this could also be that he sold the pictures in the dark. the darknet or dark markets basically. So the motive can be money as well, but that's something that, yeah, I don't know in that case, of course. So I would say that this is a sexual offender, and the victims are, in that case, were young girls, but of course they can be boys as well. Daniel Perry. This is actually one form that I also studied quite a long time for my thesis, doing a qualitative research of collecting victim reports online. So I would call this actually webcam blackmail, which is initiated by video chat by a webcam. The motive is money. In his case, actually, they also found the cyber criminals, and it was an organized group from the Philippines who have had recordings of young girls to show those whoever would actually fall for that trap, basically. It doesn't have to be always through a webcam. It can also be sexting on social media, instant messaging, but they would have sexual content to blackmail. And this is, how did I call it? Yeah, organized crime to generate money. Here I found that most of the time the victims were male, but there's always a case, of course, where women also fall for this. But I would say more male victims in that case. And then we get into image-based abuse, or also called revenge porn. The motive for revenge porn is very personal. It's harmful, intended. It's malicious in a way. It's personal, harmful. As we go more down this road in the next minutes, it doesn't have to be always personal, but most of the times it is. And this is also how the whole revenge porn started. It can also be strangers just finding images through Snapchat, correctly taking a screenshot, for example, or Kik, like an instant messenger, and uploading them somewhere at websites called leaked sluts what was it, leaked sluts snapshot.me. So they're looking for those kind of pictures and uploading them there. The offender, hard to say, it's an individual that you most likely know. And the victims, in the first sites it was women, now it's women, men alike. It's also that here it's mostly, well, no, it doesn't have to be adults, it can also be teens, for example. Okay. Okay, what I did not consider now is if I want to put on my presentation again. Okay, but I think you get the picture of those three forms. So I wanted to give you the whole overview, but we will only continue now with image-based abuse, because this is something that we want to address today. Especially also because those images are most often connected with the real name, social media account, Twitter or Facebook, for example. In older cases around 2010, 2012, it was also even connected to workplace and addresses, so definitely identifiable, which is critical as a victim to be identified and become victim of cyberstalking, for example. Okay, I'll remove this over there. Okay, as it warms up and shows, the next slide is also giving you examples of victims that I came across a study that was from last year, and that was one of the first kind of studies that actually researched the impact, the mental impact on victims or survivors on revenge porn. Very interesting study. As it turned out, it was qualitative nature. It was 18 females, but the study was not intended to just interview women, but as she recruited her interviewees, she only found women in that case. So yeah, form of revenge porn can be extremely hybrid as well. So Anna-Marie, for example, her boyfriend uploaded, or not uploaded, offered a disk full of images of her naked on eBay, which she was able to turn down, or ask eBay to turn down. After that, he created a porn site just for her to upload the pictures there, and they were publicly available after that. Regina had a very extreme case. She went with her husband to the hotel, was drugged there and raped by her husband and another man. After she found out, after a few months, she divorced him, and he sent her sex tape, which of the rape, to her work, and she was fired as a consequence from that. Anisha was by ex-boyfriend also. She had sent him pictures during their relationship, and afterwards, after the breakup, he stole her identity online and pretended to be her, sent pictures of her to strangers, and offered sex for free. So when she was at her place, men showed up wanting to have sex because they thought that she did offer online. So you see, all of those are forms of revenge porn or image-based abuse, but can vary a lot. So for this talk, I was wondering how did that all start, and I could find the first record from the 1980s actually, which was an offline magazine that had a feature called the Beaver Hunt, where women could self-submit pictures of them like naked and put a name to it, hobbies, sexual fantasies. But in that case, a few women sued the magazine because they did not submit their images, someone else did. And the magazine did not contact them for their consent, and they did not agree to be in that magazine. So that was the first reference I could find. And when looking back now on the cybercrime forms that we talked in the beginning, this could be B, like the middle category where it isn't conventional crime, but through technologies today, it was transferred into cyberspace. I would agree with this, but I would also say that to the extent that we see image-based abuse today, I would almost call it a pure cybercrime, because it's the behavior that we have today in expressing, exchanging images, communicating with everyone. It wouldn't have been possible like this in the offline world. So I would settle between B and C when looking at revenge porn. So yeah, I found two websites, both created around 2010, very much alike. I couldn't find any connection why they have almost the same name. Is Anyone Down was actually founded by two guys and shut down by the FBI in 2012. What they offered is that someone could upload pictures, nude pictures from an ex-partner. They did have a category called anonymous bounty. When they were not able to identify the person, they offered free stuff. So if someone could provide a screenshot of social media or Facebook or Twitter, they would get some free stuff as a reward, basically. This website also offered like a section takedown lawyer or takedown hammer, where like a lawyer was able after payment to take down the image. FBI investigation started, but not due to the reason of the nature of the site, only because they did advertise on their website that they would react to requests to take it down, but they did not in real time, I think. The other website is anyoneUp.com. Hunter Moore, he has been actually quite big in the media. Around 2012, he was called by the media the most hated man on the internet, because he did quite some damage, I would say, to his victims, which he did not agree on. He started this website after a breakup himself, and he received a lot of pictures before from that girl. So he started this website with some friends together, and they uploaded pictures, but it took off very quick. And by 2011, they actually had 30 million views per month. And he became very busy. He worked 5 days a week, 12 hours, to manage all the posts that he received. And together with a friend, he did moderate the site, and they generated around $13,000 per month just through that website. It was also taken down 2012. It was a bit of controversy, I think, that the FBI started investigating in 2012, not because of the nature of the website again, but because he was suspected to have retrieved images through a hacker who was known by the name Jerry Jones, but that's not his real name. So he was charged, I think I have all the information on the next slide. He was charged for unauthorized access to computer systems and multiple identity theft. So not because of revenge porn or creating a site that allows images without consent of the victims. He had pretty much set formula to upload pictures, which meant that he or the person who uploaded the pictures had to connect it to a social media account. They first showed a close picture, then a naked picture, and which is also very controversial is that they did take, it's not controversial, but they did take legal precautions regarding underaged individuals on the images. So they did not want to have anything to do with child pornography. They advertised it on their website, and they handed over cases like this to law enforcement directly. Okay, so I'm going back now to how it all started, because I wasn't finished in the timeline, but I wanted to talk a bit more about the first websites of its kind. So what I could find, what is active today is anonymous image board, which is a good example for not knowing the person. I felt I think that I do not understand this website completely. It's a language that I think I have to know and be there for a while to understand what the comments actually mean. But it's definitely a promoter of image-based abuse. It has categories and categories such as random nudes where people are not aware that they have been taking pictures of. MyX.com, I would say, is a classic website that shows the full name of the victim, the age, sometimes where those people live in, and images, and they even leave text like, "This person has been cheating on me, and that's why I put this up here." So you can feel it's personal and harmful meant from the beginning. And I do believe that there's more out there that I have not discovered or I'm not aware of. Okay, so revenge porn, I'm starting to use both terms now on that slide, because revenge porn means that there has to be a pornographic image or film which is published or distributed to someone without consent of that person. and it's usually meant to be harmful. What researchers start now to see, I think, is that first of all, it's not always meant as a revenge. It's not always meant harmful. Victim and offender might not always know each other. And not all images have to be classified as pornographic. It can also be it can also be a picture that I just don't want anyone to see because I did share it with one person only, and it was not intended to be public. It can, yeah. So it can be intimate but not pornographic, but it's still an image-based abuse. So in Australia, at least, academics and government agencies are starting to use the term image-based abuse instead of revenge porn. Also, sometimes when it's a film or recording, it's non-consensual pornography called in the research. Okay, I have to quickly check. So, image-based abuse. Hello. Why is it? Why is it so bad in a way? Why is it considered abuse? Is that most of the victims suffer immense humiliation. I don't know if if you imagine you've sent very intimate pictures to someone and find them uploaded with a very hateful text to it. You have sent to your working colleagues or wherever you are. It's something that stresses a person, that causes a person psychological consequences. I also want to say in that case that in that kind of offense, the dark number is very high. Not all victims are actually coming forward or filing complaints or going to law enforcement even because they're so humiliated that they don't do that. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's my last slide now. Also to go over you is that I did the research I did covered United States and Australia just to do some literature review, and most of them stated that law is insufficient right now. Also because there are so many hybrid forms and it's rather new, and also due to the fact that yeah, what basis should be used to classify this? And I think that's something that Cecilia can maybe answer when looking at revenge porn or image-based abuse. So we have like 9 minutes until the pizza arrives. Is it already? Whoops. Aha, okay. Yeah, the pizza break is scheduled now. Are there any questions? Any thoughts? Any? US. That's also something actually in the US that I found. They out of all of the states, 36 states have already a law addressing revenge porn. But most of them are based 50-50, so they blame 50% the victim of taking pictures and sending them to someone or distributing it, and 50% is the offender. And sometimes they say if the victim took the picture themselves, they are to blame. So yeah, and that's in a way it's a bit double or triple victimization also, because first of all someone uploads your images and you're completely exposed in a way that you did not intend. Hold on a second. Then you get hateful comments because it's anonym on the internet. Anonymous, thanks. And then also you become victim of physical threats or cyber stalking, as that girl, for example, that that the ex-boyfriend pretended to be her and sent images to strangers, and they showed up at her house. That's also physical safety in a way. So it's several layers of victimization when someone does that to you. Do you want to? Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The qualitative research that I read, or the blog post that I found, is more that everyone feels pretty much helpless because law enforcement feels the same way, because they, yeah, it's pretty new in a way. I mean, or not, because 2010 websites like this were up, but they don't feel that they are being helped very much. I mean, even if they are able to take down the picture, how many times was it distributed before that, for example? And I read one victim that said that she was pretty angry about being out of control of her own images. If someone would have actually asked her, and like she took an example as if someone would frame it and put it in a museum, and then that would be like a, not museum, like an art gallery or something, that would be okay. But right now she felt out of control because she had no power of who sees those pictures and who it's distributed. In her case, actually, it was distributed to her whole faculty and at the university, to all her colleagues, and she felt very violated.
So this is what I'm going to talk about. The criminal offense is applicable to sextortion, since sextortion and image-based abuse is not a criminal offense per se, but instead the legislator is addressing this from a number of perspectives, and I'll bring forth a few of those. Then we're gonna just briefly talking about the criminal trial procedure and the pros and cons of that and the problems of it, most of it. Then I'd like to address the question, domain addresses as instruments for crime. Swift removal, lessons learned from the piratebay.se. Because, yeah, we'll get back to that, but a couple of years ago, you started, the legislator, or the instruments of the legislator were law enforcement were suddenly able to confiscate these, since they were perceived as instruments for crime, which is an interesting aspect when it comes to sextortion as well, which can be a crime. And then the GDPR, sextortion as unlawful use of personal data, which is an interesting twist, I would say, to the GDPR. We mostly talk about it as in completely different terms. I would say we talk about it as unethical marketing abuse, or we talk about advanced analysis that you've not given your consent to. But this is an interesting twist where we see that the GDPR and its broad applicability could actually be very helpful for victims of image-based abuse. So the question this evening is more or less, can supervisory authorities be your backup plan when you've been victimized under some type of sextortion? So that's the agenda. And don't forget these questions that you're all encouraged to be creative around. What can society do to handle sextortion and image-based abuse? And what type of media competence is needed to handle this? All right, let's get going. Well, oh, I brought this. Ah, damn it, I wanted to remove this one. But this is me. I'm a lawyer. I'm focused on digitization and commercial law. I can say it straight away. I'm not focused on criminal law at all, actually. So everything I'm saying here is something I've researched during these past couple of weeks. But still, I mean, I've been trained to think about these things, so I figure I could give it a shot. What I actually do work with is GDPR compliance and different types of commercial law, useful and necessary for tech companies. I was raised in Stockholm, I was educated in Gothenburg, and now I work in Malmö, Copenhagen, and Stockholm. So that's me. And on a more personal note, I've always cared for each individual's right to sexual integrity and respect for sexual expression. This is why I think this is such an interesting question, actually, because which there's always been the notion that the victim is to blame, especially when it comes to sexual offenses. That it's always in most cases the woman, the victimized woman, that is at some level actually responsible for being, attacked or the victim of this offense. And that was a big debate a couple of years ago when they talked about this in Sweden, when we discussed rape and whether or not women were to blame for these situations by choosing to wear short skirts or revealing clothes, because that was apparently something that the court considered. And being drunk as well. And I mean, how much can you think of in terms of your own responsibility when it comes to being a victim of a crime, And what happens in society when we start saying this is your own fault, you're to blame, you shouldn't have taken those photos, you shouldn't have sent those photos to your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. What does that mean for society, right? You're nodding, I appreciate that. So the applicable criminal offenses that I would like to talk about are the following. But yeah, first, I think I've already mentioned that, but sextortion and image-based abuse is a criminological definition. It's not a legal definition. And that, of course, causes problems, because we will try to... What Diana described to you before we had pizza was the reality, right? And what I work with and what lawyers work with is the legal aspect to these things. And those, as many of you already know, are not at all the same thing. So lawyers tend to hate going into that world, that the rest of us live in. So we will try to make these two worlds get closer. But okay, there are depending on how the activity in question has been performed, there will be different types of criminal offenses applicable. What I'd like to bring forth is offensive photography, basically taking a photo without consent to discredit someone, typically a locker room situation. That's not legal to just take the photo there. Slander, violation of reputation. Basically, that's the act of distributing material with the intention of discrediting someone. And here, of course, nude photos distributed broadly via the sites you mentioned are clear-cut cases of slander. But it doesn't have to be of a sexual nature. It can be... The crucial thing is whether or not the intention is to discredit. So that will basically, that could be anything. That could be, someone with strong religious beliefs in one community has, I don't know, done something that is not okay according to that religious beliefs, and then there's a photo of that, or there's information of that is then spread to this community in order to discredit this person. See the thinking? You should put some nod. Very good, very good. Then of course it's the unlawful threat, like when you threat to rape someone, as Diana mentioned. In many cases, these things, they start with that people make contact with the victim or the person in a photo and said, "You slut, I'm going to rape you, or I'm going to stab you, I'm going to kill you." And there was this big debate in Sweden, I think a year or two ago, where public women came out and said, well, I've been contacted so many times with these type of threats. As soon as I'm on stage saying something about feminism or integrity or just showing my face in public, someone's going to react to this and be rude, to say the least, and threatening, and just way worse than you would be in a face-to-face encounter. Then there's the assault, sexual assault, very much relevant now in the Me Too movement. What is assault and sexual assault? well, in short, it's about some sort of activity intended to make you feel bad. And that's assault. And sexual assault is when you're violating someone's sexual integrity. And the concept of integrity is such an interesting thing, I would say. And the philosophers, God damn it, she was here, and would be nice to have her opinion on this, because integrity is in fact the right to decide for yourself, basically. And if someone takes, and to be coherent in your own norms. Follow my reasoning? So if someone violates or tries to describe your sexuality in a way that you have not really agreed with, that you don't agree with, then per se that the person is violating your sexual integrity. Grooming, that's contacting children for sexual purposes. And there's actually just a few years back, this was made into an explicit crime under Swedish law, which was perceived as very good from a media perspective. Yet there are huge problems in applying this in court, because it's what you've actually made a crime is the act of making contact with the child in order to sexually abuse that person. So, which is obviously quite hard to prove. So that's problematic in practice, but really good in theory. Bring it on. Most definitely. You're addressing something that's really important here. I'm talking about Swedish law. And most of the material that Diana has came across is not Swedish law. It's not Swedish environment at all. It's North America and Australia, exactly. Which is so yeah, you're right. It's a problem. There might be some, but I mean, I've done the research when it comes to if there are any important case law that we should bring up, and there aren't that many. So maybe that says something about the status. Bring it. It's that's a very good question, and that there's not a one solution to that. It'll have to depend, but often it's a question of where the perpetrator is and where the victim is. Come again? Yeah, the first thing would be to hunt them down. That would be necessary in most cases anyway. So then so you will have to know what the perpetrator is in order to file a lawsuit against that person. But it definitely addresses one of the problematic aspects to this, because if you don't know the perpetrator, or if you don't know where the perpetrator is, or for some reason it's hard to get to that person, what else can you do when material is already published online? Well, who the information belongs to is not necessarily important to know, or is not necessary in all cases in order to file a lawsuit for a criminal offense. It's a public prosecutor that needs to develop a strategy to, like, okay, we have this crime, it's been committed to a Swede by a Swede. We're gonna, in a in a dream scenario, and then we can file a suit in the Swedish court for this. Because the crime has been committed in Sweden. But you're very right that it's not a clear-cut. Who said? Hmm? No, you're very right. Hmm? 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 For I'm not sure I follow you, because if in the case of slander, for instance, then the criminal offense is it's basically one person distributing something with the intent of discrediting someone else. The method for distributing this, or the recipients of the information, is not that important, where they are geographically. But if the perpetrator is in Sweden and he has these intentions in Sweden, then it's under Swedish law. There was this instance, for instance, there was... Come again? Targeted towards a country. Hmm? But the means for distribution is not the key thing when it comes to slander. The important thing when it comes to slander is the intention and the perpetrator and the victim, and where those are. And those are in one country or another. Mm, mm, mm. Well, that's the same reasoning as why you go to Amsterdam to smoke pot. It's not a crime in Amsterdam. It's a crime here. So yeah, so then you're very right. It's about where the crime was committed. Where was the distribution committed? Not by which means were the distribution done. See my thinking? It's not about how you distribute something. It can be you can shout it out to the world, basically, or you can write it in a magazine, or you can distribute it via online, or you can just have a private video show for your friends. And that's not the point. The point is, where was it committed? I think what? Well, these I didn't. What did you say? Hmm? 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 Well, you're attacking this from the available angles, I would say. And if you have traveled to some other country where this wouldn't constitute an offense, then okay, fine. Perhaps not. It wouldn't be the best strategy to have that as your first claim as a public prosecutor. Then perhaps go with offensive photography instead, because as you say, that took place in the real world, undoubtedly. So yeah. It's a tricky question, indeed, and it's not. It's definitely a tricky question. But now you have an introduction to the criminal offenses that are usually applied for different types of sextortion. The criminal trial process. Well, there's the preliminary investigation. That's the police together with public prosecutor. That's what we see on TV. That's mostly exciting. Then it's actually the trial and the main hearing. And if we have reached so far, the court will come up with some sort of judgment, court ruling. And what they're actually saying, what they will define there is, do these chain of events constitute a criminal offense? As opposed to the everything that happens before here, before we have a judgment, before we have this procedure where people are judged by the media or all of us. I mean, it's at this point we actually know, has a crime been committed? Yes or no? And of course this takes a lot of time, and things are routinely appealed to at least one additional instance, at least in Sweden, which makes it take a year at least to get somewhere with some sort of decision on whether or not these things constitute a crime. And over those 12 months, the photos are up there. They're accessible to everyone, everywhere, which is definitely a problem as a victim of sextortion. How private? Mm, 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 mm. Exactly. It's like the many victims of sexual crimes often describe the trial procedure as even worse than uh, um, the first attack or the first offense. So not very many would want to engage in this thing. They just want it, taken care of swiftly and move on, which of course is a problem, because then we don't have many cases, we don't have any precedents on how to handle these things. You see the problem? Yeah. And this actually illustrates something that I think is something really problematic in the question of victimization, because often the victims, when they describe, if there's no conviction, if the perpetrator is not found, or we do not have sufficient evidence to have that person convicted, then they're set free. Does that mean that there was no crime? Does that mean that the victim shouldn't be entitled to feel what they feel? You see how I reason? I mean, of course, to me, on a personal note, to me, it's quite clear that there can be a victim without having a perpetrator convicted for the crime. Obviously, because there are so many cases of this around the world. But this is not something that the law enforcement system or media is equipped to handle, because this is a quite complex intellectual balancing act. And no one really knows how to address these things. Problems with criminal trial. As you already mentioned, there's an unwillingness to report crimes because it's often perceived as a shameful thing to be part of. Time takes a lot of time. You're uncertain of the outcome, the court's ruling. And also it has a quite, you can question the effect of it. The pics and the videos, they're still in the public domain, basically. They're still accessible to anyone. So how effective is it to go to the police with this? And of course, if no conviction, is there a victim? So that's, yeah. Huh. Did I duplicate that slide? Oh. Oh. Okay. So let's think a little bit outside the box. So there's been so many court rulings and so many things when it comes to the Pirate Bay. I've lost track many years ago. But one thing that we discussed was something that happened. I think it was about 2 years ago, when there was a ruling that the Pirate Bay.se had been used for a criminal offense of copyright infringement. Yay, a crime has been committed. What can you do? Then they confiscate the domain address, which is usually nothing that has been done before, and say that no, this is actually an instrument of crime. So the government can confiscate this, as if it would have been like an axe or a what is that? Kofot. What's the crowbar or something like that? Which is like, as specialized in intellectual property, this was a really big deal, because we've always walked around saying that domain address, that's not property. That's a contractual right that you are given, it's a contract you have with the organization representing the state for some sort of top domain. .se is, for instance, handled by IIS. Stiftelsen för infrastruktur, vad heter det? Ja, IIS i Sverige. And you buy domain names by a registrar, right? Who's here has bought a domain address at some point in their life? Yes, then you know. As opposed to intellectual property, which is not a contractual right, but instead a piece of property that you can transact, right? You can give a license to your trademark, you can give a license to your copyright protected material or your patent, and that's different in certain ways. But here, no, suddenly domain addresses are also property, because they can be confiscated, like a crowbar. Okay, so yay! What about that for a change? That means that if we have a crime, in this case, a sextortion-oriented crime, that means we can, the government can confiscate the domain name. Yay, great! But then that still leaves us with the discussion on how to get to the point where we have a crime to base this on. So I'm not sure it helps, but it might be part of the discussion anyway. Yeah. No, and that's the other thing, actually, because IIS, as you can see, could they confiscate or temporarily deactivate domains when they are used for criminal activity? And I looked through their terms and conditions, and theoretically, they reserve the right to take down a domain address, or in some way block access to a domain address when it's used for example, child pornography. They say, but it has never happened to this day, unfortunately. And here, in my opinion, I think that the IIS could definitely expand on this right, since we are we have to buy this domain address from them. They don't have to sell it to someone that has the intention of committing a crime by using this. No, you wouldn't. No, but I'm not saying that you could prove that in advance. I'm saying that you could reserve the right to take it down or confiscate it if you, given certain ethical considerations, think that there's a crime committed here, as is the case with child pornography, for instance. But everything's a slippery slope. That's not an argument for not handling the problem. If they are one of the few instances that has, possibility to handle this, then that's also. No? But that's not what I'm discussing here. I'm not discussing whether or not the IIS should have like an committee reviewing every request that comes in and decide whether this might be used for criminal purposes. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that IIS should perhaps have some sort of legal instance to which you can go when a domain address is obviously used for severe criminal offenses. And then, no, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. They should at least have something, as these are the guys that should know these things, as opposed to like the average policeman that you reach when you call 112. Well, that's what I'm saying here. That maybe, since they have the possibility to be a little bit more flexible, then perhaps they could rewrite their terms and conditions and reserve the right to take down domain addresses when they can see something that they interpret as a criminal offense or violation of, I don't know, something. Exactly. This is a commercial transaction. This is business. And most social media platforms have something similar. They say that if you are doing something that we interpret as criminal, we may actually block you, just like that. And that is something that they have to. Yes, exactly. That's a very good example. And I'm requesting. Time is running away, so I think we need to move on, actually. Because it's already 22 to 8. And I only had until now. So, thinking outside the box, number 2. The GDPR. Have you heard about the right to be forgotten? Yay! We love that right, don't we? I do, at least. I would love to be forgotten by some social media sites. Not all, but some. Anyways, we've always described this from a commercial perspective, or like how hard it's so hard to handle these type of requests, etc., etc. But here, and we also say like, what will the supervisory authorities, what can they do to help us out? And here we are, actually as victims. I'm saying we have not been victimized yet. But since the GDPR creates the possibility for an individual to request for someone to forget them, and if that organization or whoever that's processing your personal data neglects to help you with this, you can always go to the supervisory authority. Like your big brother. Hey, someone's been treating me bad. Go punch them. I did that when I was 10 years old, actually. It was very effective. And now the supervisory authorities, they have to help you. They have to help you. Then you can actually go to the, what I'm saying is that you can go to the supervisory authority and you don't have to talk about, I've been the victim of a crime. You can just say they're using my personal data without having a solid legal ground. And I have requested for them to take it down and they're refusing. Go hit them. See what I'm saying? Yep. Mm. Okay, that's a related question, but then you'll need to start with it's hard to know where to begin. But then it'll have to be, then it would probably be much harder because it's not necessarily a commercial use of personal data. It's for private use, and then the GDPR doesn't apply. For the same reason as your own photos of your family and friends, you are not subject to the GDPR. After the christening of your child, you don't have to email every participant and say, "Hi, I'm using your data. That's the photos I took from the christening." 20,000 people. All right. Okay, so I don't know this marine case, so it's hard for me to talk about that, but I can say a little bit about when something becomes commercial and not private, and that's often when it starts to represent big sums of money, for instance, or commercial interests of different types. But you're addressing something that the defendant will bring forth, like this was not a commercial use. But for instance, when it's a site as the one myex.com, for instance, that's quite clear, has like commercial value to it. There's often ads on it as well, making it even more commercial. So that's basically you're making a case for whether or not something is a private or not use. Mm. Yeah, I would actually go to the supervisory authority first before the police, or not before the police, but I will go to them at the same time. Mm. Yeah, that's the cynical yet somewhat true picture of how these things work. All right. That being said, we've talked about, I should have amended this. Interpersonal crimes. What are the offenses really? What can you do? Public prosecution. You can report data protection negligence or violation to supervisory authorities, and you should never shame the victims. That's the most important thing, because it often tends to come down to that this is your own fault. Why did you even take those photos? Why did you send them? Blah, blah, blah. So what do we want, Diana? No, you can't see the slides, I can. We want broad media competence. We want support from IIS, supervisory authorities around EU, to handle this. Best practices. Somewhere to turn when you've been victimized. We want, of course, respect for each individual's prerogative to express themselves as they wish. which is a big part of growing up and being part of our modern society. Every teenager does stupid things, you know. That's part of being a teenager. That's what you should do. You cannot walk around telling people not to live their life. Then we're in, I don't know, a country I don't want to live in, at least. Yeah. And we've set some best practices, right? Always report offenses to the police. Always, always, always. Even though you know that they might not be adequately funded to help you. Try to identify the website owner and domain holder. For instance, see public registers. Make a request to be forgotten to this website. Google alert your name, your social media account. Contact supervisory authority for data protection. Make more good stuff than bad stuff. Is that what you're saying? Yep. Mm. But I mean, I know that you're supposed to think that these things, that this is hilarious. And at first I agree. Of course, it's like, why would, okay, send it to more people. How can that be a good idea? But looking at it from a different direction, I mean, if they are going to use it to track down your this type of unwanted material, that's what we want, isn't it? Isn't that what the victims want?